So what if you pledged yourselves to the dark gods in Warhammer 40K, but you don't know which of the ruinous powers to follow? Hopefully this video should be of some help. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're going to talk about the 4 Chaos Gods of Warhammer 40K, Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh and Tzeentch, a little bit of the lore behind them, and some of their characteristics of their mortal and demon followers, both in terms of background, current miniatures in the game, and how they tend to play in the rules. Hopefully should be interesting if you're new to the game, or just to the dark forces of chaos. The Chaos Gods are perhaps the principal antagonists of Warhammer 40K, residing within the realm of the warp, and each being a dark reflection of some of the whims and failings of mortals. They constantly vie with each other for power and dominance, and whenever they have opportunity, they launch great incursions into the galaxy, millions of demons pouring through great rifts, turning an unsuspecting planet into a hideous extension of their realm. Each Chaos God is expressed by their demons that follow them, and also their mortal followers, the principal of which being the Chaos Space Marine Traitor Legions. Let's jump in then and see what these shadowy forces have on offer, and we'll start with the God of War, Khorne. Khorne is the blood god and the Lord of Skulls, and he is the warp deity of anger, blood, war, murder and hate. He's often depicted as an enormous stereotypical demonic figure, a great muscle-bound red mass bearing a mighty axe, an unstoppable force of fury and battle rage. The power of Khorne primarily flows from hatred. Brutal armed conflict is never too far away in the 41st millennium, and Khorne cares not from where the blood flows. Every war and battle serve to strengthen his hold on the Chaos realms. When demons of Khorne burst into the real space, they are often accompanied by rivers of boiling blood, warp creations bound in brass and iron, and leave mountains of skulls of their enemies in their wake. Khorne's sacred number is 8, you'll often find their demons fighting in those numbers, and Khorne's rival is Slaanesh, the force of the two fighting with each other as much as they do with any in real space. The demons of Khorne are often led by great winged bloodthirsters, enormous muscled brutes bearing great axes and soaring aloft on leathery wings, the ultimate embodiment of Khorne's rage. Their lesser demons too are also ferocious adversaries. Khorne's bloodletters bear ferocious hellblades, blades that are capable of cutting through near any armour, and are often seen riding to war on juggernauts, bestial automata bound in brass. There are many more forms though, skull cannons and chariots, the fleshhounds of Khorne, which were a fairly recent addition to their miniature range, and special characters such as Skulltaker or Karanak. On the tabletop, Khorne demons are understandably ferocious in combat, getting extra attacks and strength when they charge in, re-rolling charges when they're next to their own characters, and have the helpful stratagem to be able to fight twice if their sheer rage hasn't got the job done the first time round. Unfortunately, at the moment they're not desperately strong in game compared with some other options. Maybe a few of their strongest picks might be things like bloodletter bombs, deep striking big units of bloodletters, bursting into real space and then making very long charges to cut to bits whatever they get in their grasp, and perhaps the exalted bloodthirsters, which should do a good job of killing most anything they get their hands on in combat, as well as receiving other buffs for either getting them there or making them tougher. Generally, Khorne demons do tend to pay for all this hitting power with being really quite fragile, and often also not all that fast, which isn't usually a great thing for them in game. Loads of damage if you can get them into the enemy, but if they get shot to bits first then it could be a bit underwhelming. Perhaps first amongst the mortal followers of Khorne are the World Eater's Traitor Legion. Muscle-bound and blood-crazed sons of Angron. It's not too hard to see why they chose Khorne as their deity, as even when they were loyal to the Imperium, they had a good reputation for being some of the strongest blood-crazed shock troopers in the whole Imperium. Compared with a couple of the other gods' traitor legions, they aren't enormously well supported right now. They're still part of the standard Chaos Space Marine Codex, and only have a couple of their unique miniatures. Khorne Berserkers are completely iconic, incredibly angry Chaos Marines bearing chain axes, though they are looking a little bit dated now. They did receive a new sculpt for Kharn the Betrayer in at least relatively recent history, who has some fun rules where if he doesn't have any enemies to kill, he might just get to work on his own troops. Good thing Khorne doesn't really care from where the blood flows. Their primary rules are from the Chaos Space Marine Codex, though they had them recently re-released in Psychic Awakening Faith and Fury, and apparently they'll be redone again once this new Warzone Charadon, the Book of Fire, comes out. In-game, the World Eaters get an extra attack on the charge, meaning their standard Khorne Berserkers could get anywhere between 4 or 5 attacks when they charge in, and then Khorne Berserkers get the fun option to fight all over again, potentially something like 8 to 10 attacks in one fight phase, really making a mess of anything that they touch. They can also upgrade some Terminators to fight in this way with their Red Butchers, and between their Warlord traits and relics they have plenty of things to make them very fighty characters. Overall though, while being great fun to play, doesn't make them necessarily enormously strong. Again, maybe slightly suffering from the same problem as Khorne demons, being ridiculously damaging when they do get into close combat, but getting them there might be a little bit of a struggle, as you tend to pay quite a bit of points for all that crazy combat prowess. It seems very likely that Games Workshop will give the World Eaters their own codex in due course, but it might be a way off yet. In any case, if you like the idea of charging into bloodthirsty close combat, letting blood flow on all sides, and unleashing all the rage of the demons on the enemy, then Khorne may just be for you. Moving on, we come to Grandfather Nurgle, also known as the Lord of Decay and the Plague God. Nurgle is the deity of disease, decay, death and despair. With so much of the galaxy of Warhammer 40K falling into oblivion, Nurgle has grown strong indeed, and the putrid minions carrying his blessings range far and wide. Standing apart from the other Chaos deities, Nurgle isn't filled with as much rage or malign intent, but rather takes the form of a benevolent grandfather figure, bestowing his disgusting blessings and gifts on his followers, until the entire galaxy is covered in a state of near death and disease. Paradoxically, despite having all this affinity, the followers of Nurgle are also seekers of immortality and enduring forever. When you've been blighted by Nurgle's diseases, you often won't actually die, but will enter more of a state of zombie half-life, potentially becoming a shambling plague-bearer forever, wandering through his realms. The followers and demons of Nurgle aren't hard to spot, and probably not hard to smell either. Covered in open wounds, pustules and sores, decaying flesh sagging off twisted bones. They're often accompanied by great swarms of flies, and there's a fair few accounts of fluff in the Warhammer 40K where nothing more than a single plague fly needs to reach a system, and that will eventually doom it to becoming a plague garden of Nurgle, as the sickness spreads unchecked throughout the Imperial citizens. Nurgle's sacred number is 7, and you'll often hear reference to the 7 plagues of Nurgle, and find their followers fighting in units of that number. Say for example the Games Workshop Plague Marine kit has 7 models in it. Within the Chaos Pantheon, Nurgle's great rival is Tzeentch, the two being somewhat of an anathema to each other, Tzeentch thriving in constant life and complexity, endless, infinite and more complex schemes, where generally Nurgle would want to see all that just fall into decay, ruin and despair. The demonic minions of Nurgle take many forms, but almost all of them sagging, bloated and postulant, though due to their state of unlife they're very hard to kill indeed. The great bloated, great unclean ones are the greater demons of Nurgle, dragging their corpulent bulks forward, inevitable as death itself. Plague-bearers are Nurgle's primary foot droops, mortals twisted and corrupted under Nurgle's many blessings, becoming mere husks of their former selves, are sometimes borne aloft on great plague drones, essentially great fly cavalry of Nurgle. There are also the twisted beasts of Nurgle, and the cavorting and capricious Nurglings. In-game, Nurgle demons do tend to be very slow and resilient, laughing off the damage of enemy forces and grinding them down in a slow, resilient battle of attrition. To represent that, the Plague-bearers and other demons of Nurgle get a 5+ feel no pain type save, where you roll a dice when they lose a wound, and on a 5+ they ignore that. They also have quite a lot of mechanics for re-rolling wound rolls with their plague weapons. They might not hit particularly hard with them, but they should at least guarantee at least some damage chipping away at the enemy each turn. Currently, some of their strongest units are the Nurglings, little annoying swarms able to cause mischief in the midfield by setting up forward before the rest of the army, and the very, very tough beasts of Nurgle that are able to laugh off a large amount of damage and still be there ready to take objectives and potentially repel light infantry. They've got some quite nice durability spells as well, including Miasma of Pestilence to make one unit really hard to hit, and Fleshy Abundance to regrow lost wounds on certain models. Amongst the demonic forces, I'd say that Nurgle's demons are fairly medium in strength, certainly having both their merits and their weaknesses. For the mortal followers of Nurgle, we have the Death Guard Chaos Space Marines. In the lore, these are the dour sons of Mortarion, corrupted by Nurgle against their will, and have now become putrid Plague Marines, immune to all but the strongest damage, and making war with all manner of biological weapons to lay the foe low. As Chaos Legions go, Death Guard are the biggest and most supported out of any of them. They were the primary antagonists at the start of 8th edition, getting their Primarch Mortarion, and unique recent sculpts of Plague Marines, Terminators, their Poxwalker zombie followers, and a few demon engines of their own as well, including the Feated Bloatrone, and the tough artillery piece that is the Plague Burst Crawler. As God-specific legions go, they're certainly the best supported, and a really good example of what could be achieved with the right attention to the others. Their rules are found in Codex Death Guard, recently redone for 9th edition, and as with the Nurgle demons, the core of their gameplay is all about being ridiculously tough. Almost every single unit takes -1 damage from heavy weapons. Their basic foot troops are all toughness 5 compared with the standard Space Marine toughness 4. And much like the demons, they make heavy use of plague weapons, which allow them to re-roll wound rolls and guarantee at least some damage stacking on the opponents. They also have the interesting new ability Contagions of Nurgle, which make enemy units far less tough to take out when they're up close. The waves of putrefaction rolling off them presumably is enough to make the foe far easier to take out, as their very flesh rots on their bodies. Currently the Death Guard are arguably the most powerful Chaos faction. Lots of solid and easy to use units that should be a decent challenge to whatever army they face. Overall though, if you like the idea of spreading disease, decay and despair far and wide, all while having a nice smile on your face and being incredibly hard to kill, then Nurgle might just be the Chaos God for you. Next up we come to Slaanesh, who goes by several other names, including the Dark Prince, the Lord of Excess, the Prince of Pleasure, and to Slaanesh's chosen prey of Eldar, She Who Thirsts. Slaanesh is the god of pleasure, hedonism, and perfectionism, and their followers will seek to crave their every urge, be that carnal desire, excesses of substance abuse, or bloody gladiatorial spectacles. Slaanesh also frequently appeals to those who are the most prideful and best at their crafts, and many a general who has pursued martial perfection to all else may find themselves drawn to the lure of the Dark Prince. Slaanesh was the most recent addition to the Chaos Pantheon, growing in the darkness as the Eldar civilization gradually began to succumb to pride, hedonism, and debauchery. As the Eldar began to care less and less for anything else other than sating their every desire, Slaanesh became stronger and stronger until eventually bursting into existence, devouring almost the entire Eldar civilization, destroying their gods, and leaving behind the huge scar on the fabric of reality that became the Eye of Terror. Still now, Slaanesh particularly hungers for the souls of the Eldar, who will do anything, even preserving their souls in spirit stones, to stop them from being consumed by this all-hungry deity. Slaanesh often appears in a disturbing blend between life perfection and bestial brutal features, and often appears genderless, with many of the demons being female on one side and male on the other, usually combined with all sorts of disturbing clawed limbs, cloven hooves, or beast-like features. As well as excesses of pleasure, the minions of Slaanesh also delight in causing pain on their opponents, often fighting just as much to wound and maim as they do to actually kill and win the battle. Slaanesh's sacred number is 6, and is a great rival of Khorne within the Chaos Pantheon, Khorne seeing the machinations of Slaanesh as being dishonourable, or weak compared with direct open conflict. The demons of Slaanesh are led by the Keepers of Secrets, lithe horned greater demons that move at terrifying speeds, and perhaps make up for their lack of sheer bulk with martial perfection. The lesser demons of Slaanesh include the Demonettes, often mounted atop Seekers, the bizarre and disturbing Fiends of Slaanesh, the flensing blade-covered Seeker Chariots, and Games Workshop also produces a fair amount of unique characters for Slaanesh demons, including the Mask, the unique Keeper of Secrets, Shalaxi Hellbane, and the demonic allegiance with a Herald and a Demon Prince in Celeste. In-game, Slaanesh's demons favour speed above all things, their models all having good movement profiles, having access to being able to advance and charge, and when they get into combat they will fight first. They maybe don't hit quite as hard as Khorne demons when they get into melee, typically landing a big flurry of lighter blows as opposed to a few big knockout ones, and like Khorne demons they perhaps are a little bit fragile to enemy attacks, not too hard to take off the board if you can get some attacks on them. The Exalted Keepers of Secrets are perhaps some of the stronger models that Chaos Demons have to bear. They're very fast, potentially quite capable of making first turn charges, and they hit out with a whole bunch of really quite powerful attacks. Should be enough to deal some hefty damage to whatever they catch in close combat. A few of their units, including the Fiends and the Epitome, can also stop enemies from falling back, which can be really quite powerful in a melee army such as Chaos Demons, as it means that if you can't fall back, then your opponent isn't going to be able to shoot you, and you can essentially hide units in close combat. Currently, out of the monofaction Chaos Demons, the demons of Slaanesh are perhaps the most powerful, and at least earlier in the year, a fair few people did have some success running pure demons of Slaanesh at tournaments. Their mortal followers are championed by the Emperor's Children Traitor Legion, the Twisted Sons of Fulgrim, drilled to perfection in military matters and considering themselves far the superior of any foe that they fight. The Emperor's Children Space Marines often augment themselves with heightened senses, either with bionic implants or disturbing and twisted surgeries, make great use of combat drugs to improve their fighting abilities, and utilize all manner of sonic weapons, obliterating their foes in a sheer spectacle of noise. Unfortunately, their few unique miniatures are really quite dated. They've got a special character in Lucius the Eternal, though he's certainly a miniature from an older age of model production, and the Noise Marine kit isn't really all that impressive. It's an upgrade kit for the standard Chaos Space Marine one with a bunch of resin parts. Games Workshop did recently release one single Noise Marine sculpt as a new model. That one went down quite well, and maybe could be a good indication of what we might expect to come from them if they did get a full release. Currently their rules are in Codex Chaos Space Marines, and the special Emperor's Children rules will be re-released in Charadon 2 The Book of Fire, their unique rules mainly being some new warlord traits, relics and stratagems. Again, they're one of the traitor legions that would certainly enjoy having its own codex fully released, and if I had to guess, they might be the next Chaos Codex to get one. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who'd really like to see the Emperor's Children developed in full. In-game currently, they also get to always fight first, similar to the Slaanesh demons, which can be handy on some of the Emperor's Children melee units, where the Emperor's Children do tend to excel somewhat. They get very easy charges out of Deep Strike due to being able to make one dice on the charge roll automatically a 6, and when they get there they have a few helpful stratagems that make them hit far better in combat with all this martial prowess. As being a fully Slaanesh legion, they get access to Delightful Agonies, really quite a handy spell for making one unit extra durable and keeping them alive, and Emperor's Children lists will also often include a big unit of Noise Marines, packing a pretty decent amount of generalist firepower, layering themselves with a lot of buffs of different characters nearby, and then being able to shoot twice with endless cacophony. As it goes, within the Chaos Space Marine Codex, Emperor's Children might just be one of the strongest legions, and again have at least had some success in tournaments. Chaos aren't desperately standout right now, but a bunch of Emperor's Children, Terminators plus Noise Marines certainly isn't the worst way that you could go. Overall, if you like the idea of murderous depraved demons of success, then maybe Slaanesh might be the choice for you. Finally, on our tour of the ruinous powers, we come to Tzeentch, the demonic god of magic, mutation, trickery and manipulation, who also goes by many titles: the Changer of Ways, the Great Conspirator, the Lord of Change and the Architect of Fate. Within the Chaos Pantheon, Tzeentch is the great schemer, and draws power from any mortals with grand designs and plots, and in particular will recruit disciples out of any who go too far in depth of search of forbidden lore. Psykers and sorcerers can particularly see the lure of Tzeentch to drive forward their ambitions, and to grant them access to new and powerful abilities. Within the realm of chaos, Tzeentch dwells in an impossible fortress at the centre of a great crystalline maze, and from there dispatches his minions to do his bidding, weaving intricate webs within webs, and great schemes and conspiracies millennia in the making, which often may fall to bits under their own sheer complexity. Tzeentch will often offer bargains and deals that seem too good to turn down, but will often turn out to be to the advantage of the god himself, and will often either manipulate the other chaos gods to join forces for a given goal, or to turn upon and fight each other only to see themselves betrayed and turned by Tzeentch. Its followers and demons will often have bird-like and avian features and mutations, and will make war in an undulating mass of mutation and crazed designs, firing sorcerous bolts and warp fire at the enemy. Tzeentch's sacred number is 9, and their great competitor within the Chaos Pantheon is Nurgle, who will constantly seek to drag down Tzeentch's complex designs into dust. The demons of Tzeentch are perhaps the most varied and free form of any of the Chaos demons, with no two ever being the same, as they shift and writhe and mutate into different forms. Amongst them stride great lords of change, avian bird-like sorcerers of immense power, shooting magical bolts at the enemy, and the very ground riding, twisting and changing as they step across the battlefield. Swarms of horrors pour from warp gateways, shooting flickering flames at the enemy. Screamers scythe their way across the sky, and flamers and burning chariots will drench the foe in warp fire. In-game, the heightened magic of Tzeentch gives them a stronger invulnerable save than most demons. Typically, the Tzeentch demons will save on a 4+ rather than a 5, and the biggest difference between them and the other demons within the Codex is that they far more often make war with ranged combat rather than close melee, with things like horrors shooting sorcerous bolts, or flamers burning the foe to bits. For their strongest options, perhaps the Exalted Lord of Change might be the single strongest demon in the Chaos Demons Codex. He has a very nasty combo that you can take, giving him a 3+ invulnerable save with the Impossible Robe, and -1 damage as a warlord trait. It means that you can have one great big sorcerer chicken that flies around the battlefield, almost immune to enemy fire, and dealing out magical damage and close combat threat with impunity. Overall, I'd say that the faction as a whole is fairly moderate in strength compared with the other demons. Certainly their biggest asset is that Lord of Change. Perhaps the rest of those choices aren't enormously stand out for how many points they cost. Finally, for the mortal followers of Tzeentch, we have the Thousand Sons, the followers of the great sorcerer Magnus the Red, whose perpetual quest for forbidden lore saw him on the wrong side of the Horus heresy, and Tzeentch's continued interest in the Legion saw them gradually begin to devolve as more and more blessings and mutations were bestowed upon the warriors. The sorcerer Ahriman took matters into his own hands, reducing much of the Legion to dust within their armour, and now the main bulk of the forces of the Thousand Sons are little more than clanking magical automata, hollow suits of armour that march forward propelled by no more than the spirits of those that once inhabited them. The only true Thousand Sons Space Marines that are left are the sorcerers, who preside over their legion of dust and continually scheme with each other to lay low their enemies. Again, as miniatures go, they have a fairly good range. Thousand Sons do have their own entire codex to themselves, which is soon to be updated for 9th edition. They have their own Primarch in Magnus the Red, perhaps the most powerful sorcerer in all of Warhammer 40K. Their own unique Rubric Space Marines and Scarab Occult Terminators. Their twisted bird-like followers in the Zangors and their disc-mounted Enlightened, and a fair few choices for sorcerer models, including Ahriman himself. Generally the range is already quite new, and some of the models are very nice indeed, particularly these Rubric Marines. In-game, Thousand Sons are all about the psychic powers. Most units in the Codex are psychers, whether it's HQ choices or the aspiring sorcerers that lead their Rubric Marines into battle. They have a lot of spells to pick from, and have a lot of tricks for either making them easy to cast or swapping out spells mid-game, really giving you a sense of playing the army like Tzeentch might maybe. Their Rubric Marines are tougher against low damage firepower than normal Space Marines, as of course there's no living parts to get hurt. They have some protection from Tzeentch with a nice Imbal save, and their Inferno Bolters get more AP than the standards, being particularly good at cutting down other Space Marines. Overall though, currently Thousand Sons aren't having such a great time of it in 9th edition. Their playstyle and psychic tricks just don't seem to be enough to compete against the other armies right now, and are one of the weaker factions in the game. I've got no doubt that this will change by quite a bit though when they get their new codex with reimagined rules. Games Workshop have teased that already. It should be out sometime within the next few months. Overall, if you like the idea of twisted mutations, magic and scheming trickery, then Tzeentch might be the Chaos God for you. So that just about brings us to the end of our tour of the Chaos Pantheon, and a look at the deities of Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh and Tzeentch. Let me know which one that you'd follow and why down in the comments below, or maybe if not that, which one you'd just like to collect on the table. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k content coming, with new videos coming out pretty much every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying regularly, I would just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, being able to see certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next for the channel, and automatic entry to the monthly prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits every month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.